The second system after physical barriers is what we call the innate immune system. The innate immune system is a hardwired system. Now, what do I mean by that? It means that it is in place to respond in a non-specific manner. It's going to respond in the same way against whatever foreign pathogens are attempting to invade the body. The innate immune system lacks memory, and that's a critical thing to understand about this system. It lacks memory. In other words, every time the innate immune system responds to a potential pathogen coming into the body, it's going to respond the exact same way. The intensity of the reaction, the duration of reaction, the cells and humoral chemicals that respond will be unchanged, even if it has seen that particular pathogen before. Now, the innate immune system works very well, and we wouldn't survive without it, but there are some consequences to the way the innate immune system works. The primary consequence is that innate immunity triggers inflammation. And inflammation, while it's critical, again, to our survival, it also creates pain, tissue damage, and what we call sickness, feeling terrible. Now, the innate immune system also has tremendous benefits, the first of which, of course, is that it helps protect us. But the innate immune system is also on call 24 hours a day. It is there constantly like a sentinel. It is on guard, and when a pathogen tries to invade, it responds immediately. Let's talk about the features of the innate immune system. Remember, we said this is a system that is not specific in any way. It will detect microbes the same way every time, and it will respond the same way every time. The way that it detects a pathogenic microbe is because pathogenic microbes have certain surface differences, structural differences between their cell structure or particle structure in the case of viruses and the eukaryotic cells that are part of the human body. So the innate immune system is going to be able to detect these structural differences between our cells and microbial pathogens. The innate immune system is also going to trigger inflammation. As I said a minute ago, innate immunity is rapid. It helps to block microbial invasion and therefore minimize the kind of damage that microbes can cause inside of our tissues. As soon as a pathogen penetrates through one of those epithelial barriers, whether it's the outside surface of your skin or any of the internal epithelial barriers we talked about, the innate immune system will be activated. Now, there are cellular responses here, including what we call sentinel cells, and we'll talk about those in just a minute. These sentinel cells are going to send out chemical messages, or these humoral chemicals, that will help to recruit other cells to come into the area. And those other cells are called leukocytes, or what we commonly refer to as white blood cells. It's the leukocytes that will then trigger the inflammatory response. And it is the inflammatory response that is going to help to kill these invading microbes. I I also want to mention that some of those humoral chemicals that are being released during the invasion by a pathogen are antimicrobial. They are chemicals that we produce naturally that are able to destroy these microbial invaders. Some of these antimicrobial proteins in the human body are routinely produced. They are always available, always on guard, ready to go. Other antimicrobial proteins are induced. In other words, it requires the invasion of a pathogen to turn on the genes that produce these antimicrobial proteins, and they are produced much more intensely during invasion by pathogens. Now, another thing I want to mention at this point as we start talking about the innate immune response is this. When we think about infection and we think about the types of disease, the types of sickness that come along with infection, we think about things like fever and that general feeling of malaise. We think about the aches and pains in our muscles and bones. It's important that we realize that it is the combination of the microbe damaging our tissues, as well as our own inflammatory response, that is making us feel sick. So in some ways, that feeling you get that is so miserable and might even send you to bed for a few days, that sickness that you feel, that's a good thing. That says that your immune system is fighting for you. Take a look at the image on this slide. It's a graph that is showing how the innate immune system and the physical barriers that we spoke of and the adaptive immune system, how they relate to each other across time. On the x-axis of this graph is time passing by, and you can see that depicted as minutes, hours, days, and weeks. On the y-axis is a very generic label, the level of protection. So there's less protection down low, more protection up high. Now, it's difficult to see because of the color of the background here, but there is right here a response that produces a high level of protection from the physical barriers that make up part of your immune system. What you can see on the x-axis is that the physical barriers are essentially providing you with minutes of protection. Now, what does that mean? That means that if you get a pathogen up inside your nose, for example, the epithelial lining that protects the inside of your nasal cavity and the back of your throat and the trachea and the respiratory system, that lining is only going to provide you with so much protection. It will protect you, but it is not going to protect you permanently. There are pathogens that are capable of penetrating our physical barriers. And that's why you don't only have that protection, you have other systems to protect you. You do have protection from your physical barriers, but really only minutes of protection. At that point, if it's a particularly virulent pathogen, the physical barrier will fail. And that pathogen that you pulled into your nasal cavity, it might penetrate through that mucus layer and those epithelial cells. At that point, it's your innate immune system that's going to become activated. The penetration of that epithelial barrier anywhere on your body is going to trigger the innate immune system. And that system is going to, again, provide you with a high level of protection, but only for a certain amount of time. The innate immune system is not perfect either. The innate immune system can be overridden. It can be conquered. It provides you with minutes to days and weeks of protection, but you can see that the protection starts to wane after days and across weeks. That's why it's critically important that this third system get activated. The third system, the adaptive immune system, is what's going to be able to provide you with lasting protection against that pathogen. You can see that the graph ends without the adaptive immune system dropping in the level of protection that it provides. It's the adaptive immune system that has memory and will protect you across time. All three systems are necessary. All three systems overlap each other and work together. Let's take a minute and think about those structural differences that the innate immune system is capable of detecting. Those structural differences between prokaryotic microbial cells or viral particles and the eukaryotic cells that make up your body. Let's think first about surface differences, because these are, I think, the easiest to recognize. For example, when we think about bacterial cells, one of the first big glaring differences between our cells and bacterial cells is the fact that bacterial cells are surrounded by a cell wall. If you think about gram-positive cells, they have a big, thick layer of peptidoglycan surrounding them. And human cells don't have any peptidoglycan. So that by itself is a foreign chemical in the human body. Now, there are some materials embedded in the peptidoglycan wall that we didn't talk about in any detail in our previous lectures, but I want to mention them now because your innate immune system is capable of seeing them differently than it sees similar structures in your body. For example, there are what are called lipoproteins embedded in the peptidoglycan cell wall. There's a chemical called lipoteichoic acid in the peptidoglycan cell wall. Anytime you see this lipo term in a word, it just refers to lipid. So a lipoprotein is simply a protein that has some small amount of lipid attached to it. Lipoteichoic acid is a lipid type of chemical. It happens to be a particular molecule that has acidic properties. And again, it is not something that we find in the human body. So our innate immune system can recognize it as being foreign. We do have lipoproteins emerging from the surface of our cells, but the bacteria have different lipoproteins. They are structurally different, and they can be recognized by our innate immune system. Those are the gram-positive bacteria. What about the gram-negative bacteria? They also have a peptidoglycan cell wall, but remember, they have an outer membrane out beyond that cell wall. There are structures in that membrane that are different from the structures in our cell membranes. That outer membrane, for example, contains that molecule called lipopolysaccharide, or LPS. Remember, LPS to the microbe, to the bacterial cell, helps to strengthen that outer membrane. But our innate immune system sees it and recognizes it recognizes it as being a material that shouldn't be in our body. There's also another lipid material called lipid A that is found embedded in that outer membrane that our innate immune system can recognize. And what about our friends, the mycobacteria? Remember, Mycobacterium is the genus of bacteria that are neither gram-positive nor gram-negative. Those are the organisms that have that acid-fast designation. They won't stain with the gram stains because they're covered in this waxy coating material on the surface of their cells. Remember, that wax is actually a molecule called mycolic acid. And you and I don't have mycolic acid on the surface of our cells. Even within that waxy coating, there are molecules embedded that can be recognized by the innate immune system. Those include what are called glycolipids. If you break this word down, remember, glyco just refers to carbohydrate. So a glycolipid is a lipid that has a little bit of carbohydrate attached to it. And again, if a glycolipid that is present in a bacterial wax coating is not found on the surface of human cells, the innate immune system is going to recognize it as being foreign.